A common thread that runs through how my family and my close friends that aren't in our business look at my acting career and doing voice work is, wow, that's a pretty big gamble. I mean, you sure you want to gamble with your future that way? That's kind of like that's a iffy proposition. And I was in a Zoom call recently where this came up. The notion of the hope that we have that we're going to get booked. And I want to discuss today the parallels between acting and gambling and to find out if you're hooked on hope. We'll do that in this episode of the VO Heroes podcast. So I was in a Zoom call recently, and one of the attendees was talking about a professor that she knew, a behavioral psychologist, who had talked about the notion of being hooked on hope. And it was talked about in the realm of gambling, because people who gamble, they lose much more often than they win. Sound familiar? If you parallel losing as not getting booked with winning of getting booked. I don't necessarily look at it that way, and I would be careful about that, but just in case that's how you look at it, I lost out on a role, or I won a role, or, there are some parallels there, and there are some easy ways to jump to that conclusion. But she said that one of the things that keeps people gambling and doing things as a pursuit that are anything but guaranteed, again, sound familiar? Is this notion of being hooked on hope. Like, we hope we're going to book. We hope the casting people like us. We hope we've picked a really good accent for that audiobook and that the audition that we send off on ACX is going to make the rights holder book us immediately, right? And that feeling of hope is something that can feed our emotional needs, can feed our desire to be successful, and in so many ways become a substitute for the satisfaction of actually booking. Or again, if you follow the parallels, winning, right? So I did some research on it. And there's an article that I've put in the show notes for this, if you're looking at this on voheroes.com, about an article from the BBC called The Buzz That Keeps People Gambling. And there's a quote in it there are a couple of quotes in it that I'm going to share with you. There's one quote in it that really got me thinking. And this quote is, if people lose a bunch, that lowers their expectations of winning, and that will increase how happy they are when they do finally win. And it made me think, well, what do we do as actors? We put it out there, we roll the dice, we do an audition, and however packaged and systematic I try and make my auditions, there's still that thought in the back of my head. Maybe this is the same for you. Let me know in the comments below. There's still that thought in the back of my head is that this is a role, this is a gamble, right? And there's another quote, and that is that all of what you feel when you're gambling, the article's about gambling, but there's so many parallels with acting and voice work. All of this contributes to the idea that much of gambling isn't about winning at all. It's about the process and the feelings of betting itself, right? And all the attendant factors that make that enjoyable. And that was a takeaway for me because that fits in perfectly with what we do when we talk about acting. When I talk to you about, ways to make your acting and voiceover better, enjoy the process. So, we sometimes think, oh, if you've got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLING, like there's a problem. But look, here's a takeaway that we can actually use. Enjoy the process. Rest on the fact that you enjoy the process, whether you win or whether you lose, and whether losing a lot, which is the standard performer's state. If you look at not getting the job as losing, you're going to lose far more often than you win, right? And so if that's the case, it's enjoying the actual process of acting. We see these parallels. Gambling is acting. Winning is getting the job. Losing, you're not getting the job. Like if that's something you can bear with for just a moment, you can get this useful notion from that. And that is enjoying the job is something that can help us understand the long stretches of the desert of not booking with those momentary lapses of judgment on the parts of our production partners when they book us, right? But what really made me think about this is that I believe pretty much all of us are hooked on that notion that we could someday book that job. The hope that what we do is good enough that it fits in the story that our production partners are trying to tell, and that our look and our presentation and our execution of the script also fits in with what would serve them. And we hope that it's a match, right? I will just state, I am hooked on hope. I love the notion that there's a possibility that I may book, I may win. And so I continue to frustrate my relatives and close friends in some cases, and continue this notion of gambling on a career as a performer. I'm wondering if that's the same for you. Are you hooked on hope? Is this something that resonates with you? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you're not looking at this on voheroes.com, head on over there. That's where the conversation is. I certainly appreciate you watching and listening. And if you know of an actor who might find this useful, why don't you forward this to them, forward the link, and see what they think. All right? I'm David H. Lawrence the 17th. Again, I thank you so much for watching and for listening, and I will see you in the next episode of the VO Heroes podcast.